All right. David Adams here, man. First off, just want to say thank you for coming on. I know we've been talking through email a few weeks now, and um, just super stoked to have you on, man. Such a like an iconic figure in South Carolina running. I don't know if you get that praise every day, but
Yeah, I
um,
appreciate it. It's been
no,
it's been a while. It does seem like it's been another lifetime, ago at times, but yeah, I appreciate it.
yeah, no, man. I always kind of like to start these off with just kind of going into like some hobbies of yours outside of running. I always think that's like really curious of because everybody kind of just knows people as like, oh, I mean, even at our age, it's just like, hey, just they just run or that's the guy doing the marathon or something like that. So like, what are some kind of like outside hobbies that you kind of gravitate towards?
Yeah, it's like my whole life it's been like David the runner, David Adams the runner. It's like one, both names even combined. So, um yeah, I've always I think being like an 80s kid, I've always been into video games. So I do, I'll play college football and sports games and some shooter games. And I recently got into like some VR games that are active, like VR golf and tennis, where you're actually, performing the movement. So that's always been kind of fun for me. So kind of like another way to be competitive, but yeah, like relax and have fun. So yeah, that just I always played a lot of different sports. So yeah, from time to time, basketball, throwing the football, just things like that. But
Yeah, and I always find that because it's always there's always like so many different hobbies that runners have. A lot of like instruments or like in choir, singers, actors. There's always like just so much more than just the running part. I think people don't quite they just kind of label you as that one niche,
oh, for sure.
and then there's just so much more.
Hmm.
Um, how'd you get started in running in the first place, man?
So I grew up playing every sport. Soccer was the only sport I didn't play, and looking back, it probably would have been the one that I would have been, next best at, just because of what it involves. But my dad was a high school football coach, so that was, kind of my first love, and always, throwing the football and breaking that down. I PE mile back when I don't know if they still do the physical fitness stuff. Like I would never get the presidential because I was not flexible, but I ran like I don't know. I mean, I probably broke 6 minutes or something as like a 9 year old. And my dad, just being an athletic guy, he didn't know anything about running, but he knew that that was probably pretty quick. So he entered me into USA Track and Field like summer races, and they had one on Hilton Head. And the first year I ran, I actually qualified for nationals and went. But my very first race, not only I won for the boys, but I got beat by half a lap by a girl. So that was interesting. Her name was Charity Fillmore. She ran through high school. I think she just got burnt out, but she was at one point when she was like 11. She was the fastest woman in South Carolina, all age categories, for like the 5K. So yeah, so I might have run like a 5:30 that day, and she smoked me. So that was kind of my first dose, just experience into running, and then, didn't realize that it would be that for so long. So, yeah, I got a lot of experience at a young age. I'm sure it added a lot of pressure that I felt as well. It was always this, you know, I need to win kind of mentality with running. For better or for worse. But yeah, so that's how it got started. And it was always in that first summer, it was actually mixed to where I would play a baseball. I think I had a baseball game in between the mile and the 800. So like I remember racing back to Bluffton to play. I tried to run the 100 because that's the event that I picked, and my dad knew better. So I ran the mile and the 800 back then.
Wow, that is something.
Hmm.
I've never heard of that. I've never heard.
Yeah.
Usually, because like you said, soccer. Soccer's
Yeah.
like the main one. Everybody kind of transitions over. Quite a
Yeah. It's
few.
usually like
That's kind of
later in high school, like you'll have the sophomore that gets into coming
yeah,
out. It's very common. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I was
Baseball's a
running
first.
exclusively in high school.
Yeah. And so you ran in seventh grade. Um, how was that? Like I know you said you kind of felt pressure, but just the development from seventh grade to ninth grade, it seems like it was really smooth. Was it as easy as like as it kind of looks on paper, or was there just a lot of like kind of growing pains to like learn the sport?
It was shockingly easy looking back. Joined the team. Hilton had, I was like the sixth. Oh, there were six guys on the cross country team at that time. Like a couple might have been basketball players, even just trying to get fit. And I remember my dad tells me this story. Like at one point, maybe in seventh grade or eighth grade, it was like he was asking me like, what am I thinking about during races, and like how hard am I stressed? And I'm like, no, it's actually pretty easy. I just run with these two guys, and then they outkick me at the end. And he's like, well, like, because I was still trying to, you're figuring out like how to push yourself and like where that line is, and I don't want to have to walk it in, and that never goes away. But I was just kind of like, figuring out how to push myself. But yeah, I hopped right in, and I was in like the top three or four guys at my eighth grade year. I think I ran mid 18s or so at state, I think, and then dropped down into the low 17s as an eighth grader. Broke my leg in three places in eighth grade, so missed region, lower state. I think I ran 17:11 or something that year before that. And all of my injuries later in life, I feel like I can trace back to that. But it took a long time because all my running happened after that injury. But Achilles issues and, just things not being as they once were definitely adds to it. But yeah, so
Yeah,
that period was pretty smooth though, for the most part.
yeah, and it's interesting to kind of note because you talk to so many people, and it's like, and even like when I was running in high school, I was always filled with a team. There was always kind of later junior, senior year, not quite. I was always a little bit more on the top. Um, but there's always being like surrounded by a team, and you have people that kind of base off of, and then obviously you have the younger guys and they base off of you and whatnot. And I know you mentioned like the team was just so small. How I mean, I guess, do you contribute a lot to your coach that kind of helped you, or were you just trying to like kind of figure it out in races of like, hey, where do I need to kind of go, and like just in general, like training wise?
Yeah, I was figuring it out. I have seen as I've talked to runners like at smaller schools now, where sometimes they're missing that like the older guys that just know the routine. Like, don't just walk around with your singlet on from the time you get off the bus. Like, there's just like traditions, like whatever, like you do these things and you're wearing like warm ups for this, and then So I got to learn the sport in that way. There were some guys that were senior enough that they, like you got to get racing spikes and how to change the spikes. And so, yeah, that was great. I did have some like good mentors in that way. My primary coach at Hilton Head High was Chuck Rudolph, and he ran at Furman. And he was looking back. I was thinking about it before I talked to you. He was probably 26, but I only know him as this, older coach. But he was still running with us for the first half of my cross country career. But yes, we learned, I think a lot probably came through him as well, where you had someone that grew up running and you kind of learn what to do. So there was a lot of figuring out with that. And that was like somewhere where my dad knew everything about every sport except for this one. So that was kind of, he was more hands off in that way, which was cool. So it kind of brought that relationship back to dad, son more than coach, son.
Yeah. What kind of spikes were you rocking back then? Were you like like what was around? Nikes, Adidas, I'm sure, like was
Yeah.
just Nike kind of like overpowering everyone back then?
Nike was it was like the only way at that time,
Yeah.
before like the resurgence, like more recently. I think the first ones I had were the Eldorette, and I remember like Bob Kennedy wore them before like he had his own Kennedy shoe. Like all the elite guys were wearing them at the time, and it had like a pink kind of lower surrounding thing. But those looked like how we know spikes now, but the cross country spikes were rough. They were that like waffle trainer
Yeah.
with the spikes. They weren't the most appealing thing. And then I ended up running. So I ran like cross country. I always wore those waffle things, and I'd put like some 1-inch spikes in if it was an all grass course. And then I had the Jasaris. I don't know if you remember those. They were half like floor, like bright orange red and bright yellow on the inside, and they were like opposites. So that was my senior year. Junior, senior, I wore those.
Huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always cool. I think like I guess fashion in general in running is so like so much more developed now with like arm sleeves and half tight. People are wearing half tights now for 5K, 10K and above now. It
Yeah,
used to be so taboo to you do that for like 8 and below. Um,
for sure.
um, for sure.
Like speed suits, for like a distance
Yes,
race, and you're like, man,
yeah,
these
yeah.
guys
You
aren't
see
messing
that
around.
in 5Ks wearing speed
Mhm.
suits.
Yeah.
So we go to like obviously freshman year, first state title. Um, that has to be, was that a shock or at all, or were you kind of like I don't want to say expecting it, but I mean like summer training kind of builds up and you kind of do workouts and you kind of start seeing some things that are starting to click. Was that an indication like freshman year was, hey, you have a shot at the title?
Not really. It was a shock. In cross country that year, so like seventh grade year, I didn't even run state. So I went from like finishing like 50 something my seventh grade year to finishing fourth as a freshman. And that was kind of out of nowhere. I was running second the whole race, which was all. And then I just got run down by, I think, two guys from Riverside just ran me down together. So I finished fourth. So that was kind of like, oh man, like that was the first time I like felt maybe I belonged here, sort of. But I was still this young, small. I was probably 5'5", 110, or I don't know, just super small. And all these guys just seem like they look like pro athletes to me in my brain. But so that whole season, I never won a 2 mile. Even in my region at the time, we had to go to Charleston for a lot of races from here. We were 3A, and I think I was like second or third, at the qualifiers or the equivalent. And that day was at USC, and it was really windy day. My dad gave me a pep talk in the van. My brother always would reference that, like it was the pep talk, Dad. Just because we didn't, you didn't have the information. There was no internet the way that we know it now. He would call like buddies in the upstate that he knew from coaching to try to get results and just kind of piece things together. You had no idea, just out there. And I took off at state meet and was basing. My dad has it on video. I probably a 30-yard lead. He's just always had like one of those VCR cameras on his shoulder, but like a 30-yard lead, and it just by the time they were ready to make a move, they could not overcome the wind and running me down. I think they just thought I was going to fall back. Make sense, but I just held it, and it kind of got out of hand, and they just couldn't do it. So yeah, it was very, very shocking. I wouldn't have, like, I was blessed to be in 3A for freshman and sophomore year. I wouldn't have as many state titles probably because I was still kind of catching up to some of those guys, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, Now was that like when you make that move? Because obviously going in the wind that's a bold move. That's a pretty bold move, especially at a state meet. Usually you just sit back and let somebody else kind of take the whole grid of that. Was that in the game plan? If you remember that, like, was that, or you just
I don't
like
really
that's it's so
know.
bold.
Yeah, because I mean, as I got older, it's hard because you're like, you get labeled as like front runner, and it's like, well, you kind of, if you're much better in that race than everybody that you're running against, then you're naturally going to be in the front. Or in a cross country race, if you're going to push yourself, it was kind of that pre mentality where it was like, I'm dying today, every race, like I'm just going to go until I can't. Which, looking back, I kind of regret that because it could have been a lot more fun to like just sit and wait and be kind of fresh for things. But yeah, so I don't really remember. If I knew that I wasn't going to be able to outrun these guys, so I think I just don't remember a lot about it, about what I was thinking. It's probably just dumb, just okay, let's go, and nobody came, and I didn't really realize the gap that I had at the time either. But it just worked out. But it really wasn't a game plan, and I totally didn't expect it at all.
Yeah, yeah. Something I always ask, because you just full sent it. Do you hear anybody? Like, did you hear your dad or your coach like yell at you, like, "Hey, you have this much of a gap on them," or like, "Hey, they're not closing," or "Hey, they're catching up," or anything like that? Like, do you
Yeah,
hear any of that, or you should just kind of focused in on that?
it kind of depends. I heard you ask some others on the podcast that same question. It got me thinking. It definitely comes and goes. I remember sometimes wanting, like, not getting the information I wanted. Like, hey, I just want to know how much of a lead how
Yeah.
much of a lead do I have, like in meters or whatever, like just because I'm just grinding. I'm like, sometimes I'd go through you go through the 2 mile way too fast and you're just white knuckling the last one. And so I wasn't going to like ease off, but it was more of the primary goal was to win. And then the time was second. So I think it just, it just calmed me a little bit to get some of that feedback, but it's kind of silly thinking about it. But yeah, so at times I would hear that, other times I wouldn't. I didn't hear this, which would have been amazing. One of my dad's favorite stories is that Coach Rudolph it was at a home meet, and there was somebody with me that was really good as well from Somerville, Graham Lovett, and my coach yells, "Drop the hammer, David!" It was like a mile to go. And my mom looks at my dad and says, "He's running with a hammer?" I think she thought I was not just, in that moment, I was just taking people out. That's why I was in the lead. So that was always great. So I would have loved to hear that. That might have cracked me up. But yeah, yeah. So yes and no. There are times I do.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting how, because I'm kind of the same way. I just want to know. Like, I don't need to hear like 20 different things, but I want to know how far, if there's a gap at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know though. Maybe it's not even a good thing to know, because then it just puts. I don't know if I get like nervous about it either, but it's like, oh, they're closing in. I just start getting worried. Like, oh my gosh, I'm about to. Especially if you're like grinding it out. Like, oh my gosh, I'm dying here.
Yeah, and it's kind of silly. Like if you think about it, I think it's just because we're like in this mode of like at that point you know, you're essentially being tortured, kind of.
Yeah.
You're like, everybody's having those thoughts like, I cannot wait for this to be over, and running faster to get it over with faster, it doesn't seem like the best option, and if you slow down it's still going to hurt just as bad. You might as well just go. But yeah, no, totally.
Um, junior to senior year. I mean, even when you look at freshman, even, well, actually, you can go back to seventh grade. But like really looking at that junior to senior year like development, is that kind of a time period where you thought you, I guess, are kind of becoming a national kind of elite runner? Or because again, I always bring it back to just like I've asked so many people throughout the years, um, just of like workouts and in general, like, did you notice anything was like you were really grinding away, like really starting to pick it up in workouts, really picking it up in easy runs or whatnot? Did you just see that development? Because national, it's one thing I think to be top in the county or top in the state. It's another thing to be number one nationally,
Mm-hmm.
with such a great time. Did you notice that development?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I had the coach I spoke about, Coach Rudolph, coached me through middle school and all the way through at the high school. At the beginning of my junior year, we ran a time trial, a 2 mile time trial to start a cross country training and stuff. And maybe at the end of the summer training into the season, I think I ran like a 10 flat or whatever, or right under. Coach Max Mayo, who eventually coached Hilton Head High with Coach Wrightson, who's since passed away, but he was the dad of a girl, a friend that I knew in high school. He was the national director of Foot Locker at the time for 30 years. Like, he was the national director when it was Kinney Nationals beforehand. So he just happened to retire and move to Hilton Head, and was like, saw we were running this time trial. He just wanted to go watch because he's just like, oh, people are running. Let me go check it out. Then he volunteered to coach myself and the best female on the team one-on-one, like a personal trainer for free, just because he loved coaching. He had no intention of ever coaching again. It just kind of worked out. And so, I had no idea who this guy was. I was just like, this man's making me run mile repeats in the morning. Like, what am I like? But like every rep in the weight room, every interval in the morning, and then I would still go to practice in the afternoon, was with him. Like, I literally had someone spotting every lift with me, which is very hard to replicate. Like, it's, even when the Gilmans came along and he was the head coach, he could not give them that much attention because he now has 50 kids to coach. So working with him over time, I'd run 15:48 as a sophomore. And I think I dropped down to under 30 the next cross country season with training with him. However, my training load had increased. I'm running doubles, not every day, but I probably went from like 35 miles a week to 45 maybe, but also lifting. Won state that year in cross country, then got a stress fracture. I had a stress fracture in my femur during Foot Locker. It was one of those, the seated races, nightmare at McAlpine off the rip. If you don't get out, you're in trouble. So a lot of that too was going on, but I don't think I realized that I knew I was hurting, but I didn't know why. So I think that was a product of that, maybe like getting into overtraining a little bit. But I was gradually getting used to it. Got rewarded that spring and ran 9:20, which was a big jump in the 2 mile. And kind of put me more toward that national elite, especially at the time. There weren't as many people going under 9 minutes. It just was in cross country. 15:50 might win state. 16, it varied drastically. I do remember looking at the guys that were running like 15:30 when I was real young, and it was just like, man, it just seemed impossible, when you're running 18 minutes or so. So yeah, to answer your question, it was gradual, but it probably wasn't until senior year where I started to be like confident in it. Something with running, just like going back to being tortured, it's easy to be like confident and brave when you're not actually running, but it's a whole nother thing when you're, someone's digging a knife in you at mile 2.5. To be confident in that way. So I never really relied on my kick enough. I definitely had one my senior year, and it was rare that I got to use it, but it was definitely a gradual increase. The summer, I've looked back at this a lot. The summer before my senior year, I worked with Coach Mayo. He built pools, above ground pools in the heat in Savannah. And so he'd show up at my house, I'd run, hop in, I don't even know if I maybe showered. I don't know. We got in the truck and just went and sweated it out all day. He would send me off for a run in the afternoon. So I came into that season with this like year of lifting and strength and running and a lot more workouts with a massive base. I probably 65, 70 maybe, which was by far the most. I think that's the top end of where my sweet spot is. Anytime I go over that, problems are created. But so I had this massive base, lifting, training through all the meets all season. So yeah, as that season was getting on, I was definitely feeling that. It's just with the lack of information, like DieStat was new, people are on those message boards. So I really didn't know what the top guys were doing.
Yeah, I think, you look at it now and it's like social media is all over the place now. You can kind of see, who's doing, like, actually, here and there, I guess if coaches kind of put it out, I've kind of seen a little bit more of like what guys are doing and whatnot. It's cool that you mentioned McAlpine, just because like it's I think it's so cool that like even today, like still like the same race tactics are literally being used as if they were used 20, 30 years ago, on courses like that. Just obviously having to get out hard and whatnot. You mentioned a kick. I mean, 153 for the 8. When you look at like distance runners, would you say you're more of a distance runner versus like middle distance? Or
yeah,
because I mean 153 is pretty solid speed especially for a kick and cross.
For sure, and especially from coming from somewhere where I didn't feel that I had a kick, but a lot of that was just learned as as I was getting. I remember seeing a news clipping of myself my senior year. I think it was Georgia Southern. I actually led the whole field the wrong way on this course. My dad tells that story in like FCA. Yeah, there was like no markings and the bike wasn't visible. So I'm like, well, I guess we'll go circle this baseball field, and everyone followed me and then picked me up. So, and then there was a poor girl that was on a mountain bike. She had to switch with a guy because I was passing her because it was grass. Yeah, it was a good time. But I saw a clipping from that, and it was the first time like I was like, man, I look jacked. Because I was bench pressing like 180 and I weighed 130 maybe. So like I was starting to kind of see this change in myself during that time frame. So with that strength definitely came speed. And I think just being athletic and playing other sports and stuff probably helped me a little bit. That my senior year, we were training for the 8 with plans of either breaking the state record in the mile or the 2 mile. I ran a few 2 miles. I ran that 9:15 before running the 8:57. But very little opportunities to run the 16. And the more I look back, I think that was my wheelhouse. It just never was the goal. And it's kind of hard. You run that fast for 5K. Why not run the 32? But I did with those. I think I ran under 155 probably 3 or 4 times that season. So I had the speed. It was just a matter of running a competitive mile, and it just was never in the cards, I guess. But that's one of those regrets I have, because I feel like I could have gone in the single digits if it had just lined up right and the weather was nice or something,
Yeah, when you look at, I think it's always kind of cool. You can kind of critique times now, and like what could I have done? Because when you look at the 5K, it's like that's a bold 5K, and obviously the 2 mile too. And when you look at the 1 mile, it's like, okay, maybe there is something, like maybe something wasn't adding up right there, or
yeah, and like non-runners don't get it. They just hear a 4, and 4:59 is the same as 4:01 to them,
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, what do you think? I mean, you said single digits. I mean, you can throw it into so many different calculators and it'll tell you like this and that. But I mean, you just kind of look and you compare off of like what other guys have done at like 8:57.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, low 4s. I mean, do you think you were kind of there? I mean, I know back then like breaking 4 was like really freaking rare.
Yeah.
Now you see so many kids do it today. It's unbelievable.
100%.
But do you think you were there, like close, or was it maybe just a little out of the cards?
Yeah, it's obviously hard to know, and the heat here is another animal too, where you're kind of like handicapped. You don't really know in some ways. Obviously, the mile's quick enough. It's more of a factor in the 5K, probably 2 mile 5K. So one workout that we did, I think the best workout that I ever completed was right before the 14:37. But as we were getting ready for state my senior year, one day I ran 4 800s in, all of them were under 2:15 with 2-minute rest. And then that afternoon I ran 4 400s sub 60 with 1-minute rest. That was a nightmare. I had my teammates pacing me. Yeah, that was terrible. But it was kind of a weird thing where it was like I kind of ran this workout equivalent of sub 9, sub 4 in a day, which was interesting. And it wasn't cold outside. It was in April or May, and I think that some of that was Coach Mayo just experimenting on me, because he meets all these guys, all the workouts that Rich was running, and Webb and Ryan Hall and Sarah Hall, Sarah Bay, like all he hears everybody's workout, so he's like trying them on me, I think, for the most part, and it was working, I guess. So he asked me before that state meet, do I want to go after the record? And obviously I wanted to. But we ran 4x8 mile, 2 mile, or 3,200 all on the same day. I think they've gone back and forth. So we ran. I knew that I had the 4x8. And 3 of my good friends are in that, and I was more interested in winning. I wanted to win a state championship with them more than I wanted to break that state record, if that makes sense. So I knew that, running that 45 minutes before the 16 probably wasn't going to work out, and it just happened to be 97 that day, which was really amazing. So once I got through the mile, the 2 mile, I wasn't worried about that at that point. I had a couple of guys skip the 4x8 to try to get me in the mile, and a couple guys hold out till the 2 miles. So people were trying to get me. But yeah, like running the 800 that day would have been impossible. I think everything that I probably would have failed at the 8 and then at the 2 mile after that, if I would have tried to do that quadruple.
Yeah, I think the state meet, it's so interesting how states run it. I'm from Florida, and in Florida, 4x8 final was in the morning, and then they had prelims throughout the morning, and then they'd stop everything. You get time to rest, and then they'd start the finals for everything like 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's like everything's kind of cooled off by then.
You have a chance, you know.
You have a chance, yeah. Like people, guys doubling it was never anything crazy. I mean, you
Mhm.
had enough time.
It was
There
more
was
like a
enough time.
regular invitational with the time versus all
Yeah,
finals packed into 2 hours or so.
yeah, and then you kind of look at South Carolina, and it's brutal. There was I know a couple girls. I don't really know too many guys that really attempted the double, but I know a few girls that attempted doubles, and they were just burnt out. They were
Hmm.
burnt out. They got to the 2 mile, and some of them even did triple with the 4x8 as well. It was just too much. It's just too much, and it kind of, I don't know. I don't know where South Carolina kind of needs to fix that, or because then you kind of do look at like athlete safety running in heat like that too, and you're almost asking for for something to go wrong.
Yeah, now they'll
Um,
call a cross country meet. This was so foreign to me, but like I've helped coach my kids in like their elementary cross country. But yeah, they'll call like if it's I'm like, yeah, but we're in the South. It's hot. Like there was never a calling, but now I mean it's safer. I mean it makes sense. I remember at Clemson he'd get us out the door before they had a chance to blow the horn for the football team. He's like, well, if you're already out there, just keep running.
then
It's,
yeah,
yeah, but yeah.
yeah, it's curious with cross too. Again, I don't know. Maybe Florida's just. I mean, it's down south even more. But like
It's
our
even
meets
better.
would start at 7 a.m. Like, you'd have girls varsity at 7 a.m., guys varsity at 7:30, and the JV meets 8 and 8:30. Or even if anything, it'd be 7:30, 8, and here it's like the first race maybe at 8:30 or 9 o'clock.
I know it's like
And
more
I'm like,
fan conducive than it is the
yeah,
athletes. We would
yes, it
just
is.
go in order. It was like 1A, 2A, 3A, and then 4A was the biggest. But we'd run at 11, and they're like, "Come on,
Yeah,
man!" And at least it was
yeah.
November. It was better, but still not great. You'd rather it be like 55 or something if you could choose. For running a
Yeah,
5K.
I think at Newberry this year for cross states, like they paused at like noon and then picked it back up at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. I'm like, dude, it's brutal for me, and I'm not even running,
Yeah,
5K. I'm running all over the course, but like I'm not
100%.
even out there running at full speed, so I can't imagine for them.
I know.
Um, I want to talk about the obviously the state record. That is that's so huge. I mean, and the fact that the record is still standing to this day. First I want to talk about the course, Fort Jackson. What do you think of it? Because obviously they still do state quals there, so
Hmm.
it's still being run on, and
Hmm.
um, you know you get to kind of compare a little bit. But do you like that course?
Yeah, it was because if you like the time frame, we didn't travel a lot. It was all, you do these invitationals every year, bounce around the state. There was not, I missed out on the benefits of like that, going somewhere huge and just the competition. Like we'd go to Furman, that was the biggest meet we'd go to. I mean, that could be a massive race, but it was my favorite course, and you ran it twice a year for 6 years. It was Coach's Classic, used to be there, and then state meet. And that was Coach's Classic was the only time all the qualifications were running against each other. So that's when it was against the top guys in the state. Everyone was always there. Yeah, the course, I was excited to see that they brought it back because after 9/11, they being a military base, they stopped having it there, and they did it for a few more years. A little bit later, I've heard some theories where they could charge for parking at Sandhills. You can't charge on a military base, so even just from a standpoint like that, it's a no-brainer. But for the athlete, it was cool. Just it was like that McAlpine course for South Carolina, and very similar in a lot of ways. It's a faster course. I feel like you get a downhill, but you do have to hit that hill 2 times, and it's not as aggressive, I don't think, as McAlpine, but it was pretty long. It was, it's still it's gonna cause issues. I think I probably learned to run that downhill really well and make up for some stuff. And then we used to go into the woods, and it could get soft in there. I was obviously got to pick where I would run, so it was helping me. But if you were in a pack, I'm sure you would just end up in some bad places. But yeah, and that was not never a plan. That was never planned. I wasn't. The goal that day was to break 15 because the ultimate goal was Foot Locker. Especially my coach, my personal trainer, was the director of Foot Locker. So whether I wanted to or not, that became what I wanted. And the year before, I think like 15:21 or something.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy, and then just up and down. But so going into that race, that whole season, we trained through everything. The purpose was let's not peak, basically. So I was running workouts Thursday afternoon, sometimes Friday morning before a Saturday. The Wednesday races in the county, I would just make a workout out of it. I'd run the first mile and annoy my buddy and ask him if this is his pace and have him tell me to shut up. And then I would smoke like the last 2 miles and try to catch everybody. So we were doing, it seemed very smart, and I was adapting and everything's going well. So the Wednesday before state, every other week it had been a Thursday or a Friday. So literally just letting off one day, that morning Wednesday was going to be my last workout. It's like it freed me to just unleash on this course that I was super familiar with, would get super jacked up for. It was a very crowd-friendly course. People are all over the place all the time. So that was nice. I almost missed the start of the race. Just whatever, putting our spikes on. My dad was recording in the stands, and it's like, "Where's David?" He was going to run out. He was going to run out and make sure the race didn't start. Basically, he was going to tackle the guy with the gun. But it worked out. So yeah, it was interesting and I ran a hard workout that Wednesday. It was the first time we just call it the step down, and it became the staple for Hilton Head and like the measurement. Everybody that came through had their times compared to mine, basically. And it was a 1 mile. You run them all as a time trial, basically. Time trial mentality. 1 mile, 3-minute rest. That was the big one. Only 3 minutes between a basically all-out mile and a 1200. Then you get 4 minutes rest and run an 800, 3 minutes rest and run an all-out quarter. And so I smoked that day. I don't know that I realized that it would be like, the thing to compare to for so long. But like I was almost hitting PRs in some of the runs because my PR was 425, 424 from my junior year track. I ran 436 that morning, then came back with like a 314 or 315 or something. That was the kind of crazy one to recover and basically almost run another mile at that same pace. And then, 211, 212 for the half, and then 57, which was probably my PR at that moment, my junior year. So that was a major confidence builder. The state meet day, I went through the first mile in 4:30, and I somehow didn't let that consume me because it was almost my PR, and I went through the 2 mile at 9:24, which was almost my PR. Both of those encompassed a hill. So it was the 2 mile had I was on the second hill when that 2 mile split happened. So way ahead of pace. Then I got that downhill to kind of get my legs back. And Coach Wrightson was standing where you enter the field to come down and do the final, like basically 800. And he knew Derek Wyatt, who eventually became my roommate at Clemson. He ran 15 flat on that course, which was the second fastest time on that course at the time ever. And then he ran 15:08 as a senior on that same course. But we knew his time hitting the field. So from the 15 flat to try to break it. So he, whatever it was, like 12:48, and I was like 20 seconds or 30. It was like something crazy. A time I didn't expect to hear get yelled out, basically. And it was just autopilot after that. But it was never the goal. It's awesome that I feel like I was obvious that was what I was meant to do. It was supposed to be that day, but it was. I guess I got hurt after that. It was knee issues after that race that showed up. That playing it safe, we just trained in the pool, and I was able to run 15:20 at McAlpine, but just enough of that. Whatever you lose, some of that edge even.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. No.
my big race.
No. And I always tell everybody like it takes one race. It takes one race to just open up. And I've told this story on the podcast before, but I just love it because I had a buddy, Daniel Moore. He was training all summer and kind of started realizing like his workouts were getting faster, and he was always like a 1540s guy, like really consistent, really
Mm-hmm.
consistent guy. Always would be sub 16, and he went to Wake Med and ran uh like 14:57, and was the first time somebody had went sub 15 since Alan Webb.
Nice.
And it was his day. It was
Mm-hmm.
his day. He beat all these ranked guys, and uh, and that's what he just kind of comes out to. It's just like I just went through the one, and it was the two, and then all of a sudden, I was at the end, and I felt good, and I could just outkick these guys. And it's just it's so cool to have like moments like that, and for your moment to be at the state meet, obviously is, I think it makes it even more special, that it was at that meet. Um, are you look at, and this is not a knock, I think, on South Carolina, but maybe it is a little bit in a way. But that record has stood for so long. Um, I think you look at the last maybe 3, 4, 5 years. I think South Carolina running has just completely shot up. There's so many more guys and gals that are running way fast times. You look at this year, like Caleb Burrows ran 149 in the 8. It's like, holy crap. And 404, and you got guys that are running, close to sub 15. Chapel Martin ran like 1501, 1502 this year in the 5. Like, he's a good contender. He's got a teammate, Jackson, who ran like 1508, or like he's got a good shot. There's quite a few guys that now finally have some viable like options to compete at those kind of national meets, with chances at NXR or Foot Locker. How records are meant to be broken. Um, are you going to be sad on that day? Because I mean, I think eventually it will be. I think hopefully in the next 5 years, whatever, maybe even next year. It's only a matter of time.
I figured like, 10 years. I mean, the other one stood for 11 before I broke it, so it seemed like that was an insane amount of time. And you still have some records from Terrence Harrington until recently. I know that he ran faster at state. I know that's another interesting thing. We don't do ourselves any service. Well, with state meet and track, if the record has to be run at state meet, and you're capable of running that, you're going to run more than one event. Like me having to run the mile 45 minutes after a 4x8, like that was the worst I've ever felt in my life after, just trying to survive. So that's not, splitting those meets up would help for sure. We've seen a surge big time here. I remember looking like at Foot Locker results and just looking for those South guys, like where are the guys from the South? And you'd always have like Florida guys and Texas guys, but never the Carolinas, or you'd have a couple here and there. I mean, we've had some guys. I missed out on some of those postseason races. The plan was always to go to one of those, and after my senior year. But it's just sometimes it's such a long season, just staying fit through that summer. I think going forward, like one of the things that's been like I've thought about as I've gotten older and like nerding out on like stats and stuff and just my own what's going on with my own body. I mean, there's like a legit conversion for altitude, but there is no legit conversion or it's not even really talked about with humidity and like the ridiculous high humidity of the South and stuff. And you could throw stuffs into the Daniels converter or like AI, and my 414 at 97 degrees is a 401 or something. You still have to run the time, but mentally for some of these runners, like if you graduated high school and you ran a 422, but you did it at 100 degrees, and it's like even just mentally what that could do for an athlete, and like them looking forward and planning their future could be drastically different. So obviously, like you had in Florida, and it's just it makes us better runners, no doubt. But it is the conditions. Sometimes it's almost like we need an indoor track around here to get out of the heat, not to get out of the cold, to give you some consistency. But yeah, these last years have been exciting. Hilton Head went on that run. I don't know if you were aware of that when Coach Mayo and Wrightson were still there. And it was every year for 10 years, the guys and the girls got first or second in the state as a team, which we were never close to that when I was there. That's what I wanted. I wanted our team to be, to be good. But it's been exciting. And these guys, it's like the internet has allowed these guys to become friends when they're not racing each other, and not only just see each other at meets, they can like try to train together and just get better as, because it's like they're all going to make each other better. And some of these guys are on the same team as someone that's capable, which is amazing. You usually don't get that until college. And it can be overwhelming if you're not used to that on the daily.
Yeah, and and that's what I was speaking with Greer Middle College charter. Like, yeah, they're stacked. Like, you look at like Lexington, talking to their guys, like they're stacked every year. They have like I think their seventh runner right now is like 16:29. Wow. And you can just keep going back, and it's like they got
Hilton did those years.
Yeah, they have guys that are like they're 10th and they're running sub 17. It's like, and just years of continuing getting better. I think that continues to kind of push the sport and elevate the sport to new heights, especially in South Carolina.
Yeah, and it's so wet. Like last year, actually a few years ago, I got a text from John Olson, and he at SC Runners, and he was like, "Your record just fell," and it was they messed the clock up, and I felt terrible for the kid. It was where he went to Colorado. He was going to run at Tennessee, and he went to Colorado. He won this past year as well. But he saw on the clock like 14:29 or something as he's crossing the line, and it was they messed the clock up. But so I thought it fell that day, and then last year was, like you said, it was one of those years I think it was really rainy. It was cold, which could help, but if it's rainy, it's so conditions based. And Sandhills being a tougher course, and I hear Newberry's tough. That's, it would be nice for the people to get on Fort Jackson, even if it's just earlier in the year. Because you also don't want to like really lay the hammer down at the qualifier. You have to do it next, so that's not doing us any favors. Either way, it's something is going right, because a lot of guys are very successful, and they're continuing. And obviously I know Sam Gilman better than all of these guys. He was training like in the system that I had for 2 years, which I felt like that was pretty safe. He was training for even longer, and he has somehow figured out how to sustain this like long term and continue to get better, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I have no idea why South Carolina does that, because again, it makes you want to kind of like drop the hammer. It has to be at the state meet. To me, it's so weird, because and then you do look at like Newberry. I've only heard. I mean, again, I've never run Newberry, the course itself, in a race. But I only hear it's slow, and you can see that too with the times coming out of state. Guys are winning states 15:50s and whatnot. It's like, yeah, but they have PRs of low 15s, and it's like, okay, well, that kind of sucks. It kind of it doesn't really give you too much of a chance to. Mm-hmm. But then they'll run at not Foot Locker. They'll run at Jackson the week before at quals, and it's like, everybody's getting PRs and running fast times. It's towards the end of the year. It's kind of wild about how South Carolina does that. I got a little bit more time, and I really want to touch up on Clemson real quick. That transition. I mean, obviously running 14:37 in high school, you would think like the transition up to the 10K steeple. I mean, you were in steeple for a little bit there too. 8K. How was that kind of transition to you? Like, were you able to kind of adjust the distance fairly well, or did you kind of see it as a struggle getting there?
Yeah, it was. What I tell kids now is shop for the coach first. And my coach there was great. It was just, I was in a unique situation where I had a college runner coach, and then a very elite level coach that at a time that the information wasn't as like, he might have been one of the top 10 like best coaches at that time. Like he coached the U.S. nationals team one time. Like just the knowledge base just wasn't there. And there's so many different ways you can do it, you know. But yeah, it just, so I basically feel like I took a step back in coaching. And now, granted, I'm in college and like there's less oversight. So you're also making decisions that maybe aren't setting you up best. And you know, you're not at home with your parents and people aren't watching you the same way. So that's obviously something as well. But yeah, I broke I broke 25 the second race. It ran at Winthrop my freshman year at Clemson, which looking back is kind of crazy. I mean, people are clearly running faster than that their freshman year, but to go from a 5K at, you know, sub 5 pace to now running an 8K, which is 2 more miles, it doesn't seems kind of crazy to try to make a jump like that. And then you go to the 10K later in the year, nightmare. So yeah, it was tricky. Just the mileage. The biggest thing for me was obviously the coaching situation was different, and now you have all these capable guys. Somebody's feeling great one day and they hammer this workout just because. It's making everyone better, but it's also, there's a strain there sometimes where you're not getting enough, you're not recovering because you're just constantly just like grinding each other. The hills in general. So it's super flat here. I have to seek hills out. So just an easy run now has 500 foot of elevation. I think there was some wear and tear there for me. I've always had Achilles issues, I think dating back to, like I said, that broken leg. But yeah, like there's different things. It's still super hot at Clemson. And you get a little more relief in the evenings and in the morning, but then you throw the hills in there. So that's just something to consider. Yeah, it was an interesting transition. I did well my freshman year, and then injuries started piling up. Got a stress fracture in my foot after indoor. We won ACCs as a team indoor. That was pretty fun. That was the first time I saw Shalane Flanagan. She was at UNC, but the race was at Virginia Tech. So Clemson had won a bunch at that time. It was a very sprinter and field events heavy team, and we were basically trying to build the distance program. And I was a Clemson fan for life for football, and just once I saw the campus, I wasn't going to go anywhere else. But yeah, I wish I would have shopped coaching more. That would have made that transition easier. And like, you know, somewhere like NC State at the time, they were the powerhouse on the East Coast even then. And just having a more like a really competitive group could have been good for me. It could have been bad. You know, you don't really know. You just do the best you can at the time with the information you have. But that transition was surprisingly okay my freshman year. And then you throw sophomore year of Achilles tendonitis for, you know, a calendar year with zero running, and, you know, my identity wrapped up in this for my whole life is now taken away, and I'm in college. It's like, maybe I should have fun for a change, you know? So that, you know, that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. Didn't handle that adversity really well. So into my sophomore year, well, just started, I drank for the first time ever, and just my priorities change, and chasing girls, it just is just totally different. So my junior year, I was healthy, but just never fully there again. And then I think I was, in general, I was kind of burnt out by then too. And I ended up not running for almost 10 years, more than a handful of times, but never training again. But that dating back to that, like 9 years old of running races, there's definitely goods and bads that goes with everything.
Yeah, I think, and that's cool too. Because I think as runners, like we all kind of go through that too, of just like there's the ups and downs, and there's the times we want to just quit and take a break, and you know, you come back to the sport you love, and but then sometimes it is too. It's just there's such a grueling like dedication you have to put towards the sport, and if you just don't give it all of it, then you know you can't quite achieve some of those results you always like kind of want to and whatnot. But
yeah. It's definitely a sport that makes better people. because it's
Yeah.
like what you hear about wrestling. Like it's just brutal. Like
Yeah.
there's much less fun than there is fun. It's super rewarding, and the best thing is having those teammates. Really, that's something you take for granted when you have it versus running as an adult, and you don't have your best buddy making fun of you like all the way up until the race starts. Like
Yeah.
the ease and tension is so great, with that. But for sure.
Yeah, especially as you get older too. I remember cross country days like high school. It's just funny. It's just funny times and good times. And as you get older, you kind of if it's not there, you're not surrounded by a team like that.
Totally.
It kind of does it loses a little bit of it as well. But yeah, man. Honestly, your career and your status in South Carolina running is I think it's a staple point that needs to be continued to be looked at and recognized. Not like you're dead or anything, but it's such an interesting career and the growth that South Carolina has had. I think looking back to like where it was and where it is becoming and the ups and downs, just like with runners, um, the status of South Carolina running is definitely on the rise. And we look at guys like you that have kind of paved the way and set the bar. And I'm rooting for your record to get broken. I'm sure you are too. It's been a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
I think when that day happens, it's going to be exciting, maybe a little heartbreaking in a way, but I think it just shows where the sport's going and the growth of it. And like I said, man, I appreciate you coming on. I would love to have you back on because I think there's just so much more to go over with you. And I appreciate it, man.
I recently got a bunch of old. My dad recorded so much. He'd coach a high school football game on Friday and then go home and get like 3 hours of sleep and then drive to Columbia and watch me run. But I have all these videos, and so I still have some footage too that has not been out. I've been watching some recently that I got on a flash drive. But yeah, I'd love to come back on later on.
Yes, no, for sure, and we'll have a whole thing on that, dude. I would love to see some of the old school videos and talk about all that. But
videos,
absolutely. Hey, like I said, I appreciate it, boss. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, dude.